Could somebody explain the process of, or the alleged process of pleomorphism, microzymas, what Béchamp was working on, and how that like ties into like the bacteria being killed by an antibiotic and then maybe letting the poison stay in you and build up over time or whatnot?
So we have this theory that each of these bacteria, fungal organisms are unique, fixed, and based on their own genome, right? But that's not true. In fact, we know that the genome of every person, the different tissues have different genomes, and the genome actually changes over time. So this whole concept of a fixed genome is a unproven, disproven hypothesis. So the whole Béchamp thing is when you create certain conditions in a tissue that will essentially force or produce different organisms coming to remediate that situation, right? You put metal in your mouth, i.e. braces, that changes the frequency and the toxicity in your mouth, and then the sort of symbiotes, the microzyma, they become strep to clean up the toxicity, the damage from that metal and frequency toxicity. And in a different situation, they become fungus. And in a different situation, they become E. coli or whatever. We have this idea that these are fixed like a giraffe and an elephant. They're not. Even pleomorphism is obvious because you can see it with a caterpillar and a butterfly, right? Mm-hmm. Organisms in nature change their structure. Now, we don't see elephants becoming toads, but we see, caterpillars becoming butterflies, and Béchamp and Rife and Gaston Massons and others saw symbiotes becoming strep, becoming this organism or that. And then they decided that you can't publish about pleomorphism, 1890s. So that's
when they decided you couldn't do it anymore.
Couldn't do it, and that was the end of it. But it's obvious.
1881 is when they had that conference where they basically held Pasteur up on their shoulders and ignored.
Right.
Yeah. So that's.
And if I could just, because if anyone is new to this concept, it's very, very almost identical to the whole idea of stem cells. Right. And people are definitely familiar with stem cells, the idea that there's one primordial cell, right, and it would be the fertilized egg, right, or its direct progeny that can change shape into any terminal cell type in our body. Like it could become a neuron, right, which could be 3 feet long, or it could become a neutrophil, right, which is only micrometers in diameter. And that the stem cell goes through a process of differentiation where it has intermediate steps and ultimately it becomes terminally differentiated. Well, pleomorphism is really the same thing almost exactly, but for microbial organisms, single-celled organisms, including bacteria and fungi. And that there is a primordial stem cell of those that has different names from different scientists. Symbiont is one of the names that Tom mentioned, but also microzyma was Béchamp's name. And there's a couple of other names, but that those basically go through a pathway where they go through different stages, and we call each one of those stages a different species of bacteria or fungus. And then ultimately it gets to the final stage, and then it actually goes back into the cycle. It can go back into the primordial stem cell. Now, we're told that doesn't happen with human cells, but, I don't know, maybe it does happen and it just hasn't been observed directly. But so this isn't really that radical in terms of what is accepted in the mainstream, but it has been very much suppressed because it would essentially ruin the whole idea that these microbes are causes of disease, because we would see these stem cells actually exist within our own body. They're easily observable in the blood, in red blood cells, in other tissues in the body, just like we see evidence of bacteria and microorganisms throughout the body, even in the brain. And this would essentially kind of overturn germ theory very quickly, but it's snuck into the public awareness already, because what we're told about having a healthy microbiome, like that is basically there because of this pleomorphic theory, right? And we know now that it's vital for our health. We just haven't fully accepted that theory that these organisms, they're really part of our body. Our bodies or our uniqueness as a whatever you want to call us as an entity are made up of a community of what we call human cells and mitochondria, which we readily admit were once separate organisms, or at least that's the theory, plus all of these other bacteria and fungi and even parasites. They all make up our bodies.
And it's also becomes easy to explain why antibiotics work, as you said. The bacteria, just like if you have a rotting log, you get fungus and bacteria to do the bioremediation degradation. And in there, you get debris happening, like the logs breaking down. So if you have a toxic tonsil, then the bacteria come to help break it down, and that causes symptoms so that you rest and get over the illness. If you come and give the person an antibiotic and kill the bacteria, now you're left with a rotting log, right? A dead log, a dead tonsil sitting there in your mouth, and you feel better, but you can predict that that's going to happen again, which is exactly what happens. And then again and again and again, until your body encapsulates that debris, and we call that a tumor. So you can see how this whole thing plays out, and why misinterpreting the role of antibiotics and why you get, quote, better, which is why you have to be careful about saying that things get better, therefore it proves something, right? You get better because you stopped the healing process. And then you have a bag of debris tonsils. It'll either happen again if you're lucky, or it'll form a tonsil, cavity or something. Or if it's in your lungs, you get lung cancer. And that's why even, they treated lung cancer and all different cancers with bringing back the infection, so-called. You reverse the process.
So when you're talking about like medical intervention, drugs, surgery, all that, I mean, that's kind of like the war model, because in order for the poison to be put in you, you're killing something that's part of you that is there to help. So, and then every single instance, that's what happens if you're utilizing a drug to do it rather than letting the process do what it's supposed to do, right?
Absolutely.
So nutrition.
Every single instance, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're stopping the detox process.
So
And then you're making the person more toxic.
Right.
Yeah, you
Which
make the
then
person
makes the
more
cycle worse.
toxic.
So what you would want to do
people.
instead, so would you just be giving your body what it needs in order to do its natural process? Like, I don't know, vitamins,
rid of the
minerals,
poison.
nutrition. Yeah,
Get
that,
rid of the poison.
right. And that would be,
Cough it up. This isn't like rocket science.
I know, but I mean, if your body's
It's
doing that
stuff in the body's
process,
Well,
Daniel,
Flush it
you
out.
can
Just get it out.
yeah.
you can help instruct a person to support what their body's doing instead of trying to fight against it.
Right. That's what I
Because
was trying to get at.
for example, if we take, decongestants or antihistamines, right, they shut off our secretions. So then the body can't purge what's causing the problem, right? But instead, if we do something like a neti pot, where we provide additional irrigation to help the body get rid of what's stuck up in the sinuses and the nasal passages, then that could, it's like being good friends with your body, right? Being a lending hand. It's like if it's chilly, bringing a sweater. And so if we stick to things like that, then we're not going to work against the body. But we don't have to do anything. If we just actually do nothing but drink water, that's been shown throughout history by observing animals and cultures, but also even in well-controlled modern medical studies to accelerate the healing process. So, we just need to really stay out of the way more than anything else and let nature do the healing that it's designed to do.
And I was kind of hoping Dr. Cowan was going to say, clean the gels.
Well, the gels, it just explain, you get poison grape in your gel, right? The cells are gels. And I just ask people, how would you get the poison grape out? Well, you melt the gel. That's called a fever. And then you snot it out. That's called, you make it run. That's called mucus. This isn't like, that's why there's sweat lodges and fever therapy and hyperthermia. I mean, suddenly the world all makes sense, right? You give somebody a coffee animal. Why? It gets rid of the poison grape. This isn't like...
That's what I've told people for 20 years. I'm like, why would you ever suppress a fever? This is your natural immunity's way to kill off and remove stuff and remove toxins. Why would you shut that off? It's so weird to me. You want to be sicker longer? Okay, then shut off the fever with some drugs. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You don't need fancy mechanisms to explain this. And you can demonstrate that the cells are gel. I mean, Ling did that for 50 years with his experiments.